Wano has finally wrapped up, and who would have thought it would take us almost 5 years to say that? So I thought, to commemorate this occasion, especially since we're now entering the final saga, why not rank my top 10 favorite arcs in One Piece so far, starting off with number 10. Sabaody Archipelago. Sabaody is an arc that takes us down an emotional realization for us the viewer and the Straw Hats just how much stronger they really need to become if they want to be able to take down corrupt world nobles like St. Charles or even survive in the New World, where they will eventually have to face even stronger warlords than before and even emperors of the sea. Sabaody is also the introduction of the supernovas, the future of the pirating world, and filled with pirates that would flip the One Piece world upside down time and time again, like in our 9th place. Impel Down. The best way to describe Impel Down is that it is a prison break arc where Luffy plunges himself deeper and deeper down to hell the lower he gets in the prison. But because of this, there is just a non-stop level of action that you can't really get anywhere else while Luffy is looking for his brother. But also on top of all the action, there is also a good amount of comedy with the likes of Magellan, Mr. 3, and Buggy. And with that, the next point that makes this arc so great is the fact that this arc brings back so many older characters like Mr. 3 and Buggy so perfectly, and their chemistry together is next to honestly perfect. And we also can't forget about one of the greatest characters of One Piece. This was his arc to shine, and yes, I'm talking about Bon Clay. The fun that this man brought to this arc was just on another level, and one of the many reasons this arc was so special. But we all know the fun can't last forever, can it? Number 8, Water 7. Water 7 is an arc that is very important to the One Piece world. It's an arc filled with joy, sadness, and shock. And it's honestly the perfect build-up arc for Enies Lobby, an arc that we will see later down in the list. This is where Robin, even though she's been traveling with the crew, this is where she truly joins them, and we learn about her past that leads to one of the most emotional and saddest backstories that I've honestly seen in any anime. Also, this is the arc where Usopp really starts understanding how truly weak he is since entering the Grand Line, and losing the Going Merry didn't really help much with that, which is why it led to him leaving the crew. But obviously not much long later, he came back and wanted to prove himself why he belonged on the crew. Water 7 also shows us the skilled craftsmen that make it even possible to sell around the world. But even so, we learn that the world government is still threatening their work, as we've seen with Tom in the past. And back in the present, we learn since Water 7 is built on the water, there are literal tsunamis that hit the city. And during that time, the crew is joined with Franky to stop the government who took Robin amidst all this chaos. Dressrosa is definitely one of the more dark arcs in One Piece, especially when you think about it. Imagine if Luffy never intervened and stopped Doflamingo's plans. Imagine one of the 7 warlords of the sea stealing the power of a king and making the civilians suffer more than he has already put them through, with the likes of being turned into toy slaves that are still conscious, but their very existence is erased from everyone's mind, including even their loved ones, so that they can never rebel against Dofi. A person from this arc that no one ever expected to shine was Usopp, with him helping the adorable tiny folk race that were planning a little rebellion. This is also the arc where we are introduced to many people who help Luffy throughout the arc and fight by his side. And in the future, I'd assume, since this is where we are also introduced to the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, where most people that helped Luffy during this arc ended up joining. It is crazy that such a dark arc can end with such a happy ending, but I guess that's One Piece for you. An ending where a small pirate crew turns into something bigger than they could have ever imagined, which leads me to number 6. Number 6, Arlong Park. Arlong Park was the arc that made me want to give One Piece a fair chance. It showed us how evil a villain could be by hurting such a peaceful village just because he doesn't like humans, which ends up leading to one of the more emotional scenes in the series, with Nami's cry for help. Anyways, it also strengthened the crew's bond and made them finally come together as a real crew, and the action from the beginning to the end of this arc was honestly pretty good, especially for the beginning of One Piece. Especially Luffy finally defeating the villain who deserves it all, Arlong. Arlong Park also revealed to us many things we were left wondering from the East Blue Saga, and how Oda is going to be playing a very, very long game with this series. And if Arlong Park is what made me want to give One Piece a chance, then this next arc is what made it all worth it. Number 5, Alabasta. Alabasta was the arc that made me fall in love with One Piece and knew I want to continue the series to the end, even if that meant watching over 1,000 episodes and reading over 1,000 chapters. Alabasta is an arc that on its own is a fun arc, and Egyptian-like fantasy doesn't sound too bad, but the thing that made this arc even more special was the build up to this arc. With all the small arcs before, with the addition of new members to the crew like Chopper, and the development with the crew for fan favorite characters like Vivi. Throughout the anime so far, the crew's slowly been realizing that the world around them is way bigger than they could have ever imagined. And Alabasta was the first big introduction to that world, with the likes of the 7 warlords and even the poneglyphs, the things they would be searching for the rest of the series, even if they don't understand how important they are just yet. And on that note, the arc ends with one of the most emotional and iconic scenes in anime that made it clear what it was to be a Straw Hat. And that leads me to the next arc, which is about one of those very crew members. Number 4, Whole Cake Island. Whole Cake Island is Sanji's arc. It is an arc that made me go from having Sanji as one of my least favorite characters in the series to honestly one of my favorites. It's an arc where we finally get to see the power of an emperor in her home base. It's an arc that takes the whole cartoony feel of One Piece to another level, and with that brings lots of comedy. Honestly, the best comedy we've gotten in the series so far. Both that comedy is also incredible fight scenes and emotional moments like Sanji vs Luffy, where it wasn't really a fight, but Sanji trying to shoot Luffy away to safety from his family. And the speech afterwards that Luffy gave was an emotional one that brought some fans to tears. On top of that, you also have the cool fight scenes like Luffy vs Cracker, or even Brook's best scene in the series so far, with him versus Big Mom. But aside from all that, the most important part of this arc is that it transforms a character that many fans were starting to hate because of his stagnant character, and get bored of, and turned him into one of my favorites, and many others. And the way we got to that point was finally learning Sanji's past with him and his family, and learning that they were Power Rangers. This arc has some crazy levels of comedy and action, but also crazy levels of emotion and sadness. And honestly, while I was making this list, I realized how good this arc really is. It really is a complete package of what One Piece is as a series up to this point. But this next arc is also like that for me, which brings me to number 3 on this list. Number 3, Enies Lobby. Enies Lobby is an arc that had the perfect build-up of an arc like Water 7 that was so good that it wouldn't be surprising if it didn't live up to the expectations after Water 7. But my god, did this arc do everything it needed to and more. It far exceeded any expectations that I ever had. Enies Lobby is an arc with a lot of drama as the Straw Hats fight their way to save Robin, and also all the fights along the way are just beautiful. With the likes of Zoro literally cutting a train in half, and also the one arc where Nami has a cool ass fight scene where she uses her mirages that she never does again in the series for whatever reason. Even Chopper had a sick fight scene and transformation that was never as cool as it was during this arc after he learned to control it. And we can't forget one of the most iconic scenes with Luffy asking Usopp to shoot the government flag after Robin had one of the most emotional scenes. But it just shows that the Straw Hats will go to whatever lengths to get a beloved crew member back. And by the end of this arc, most fans, including myself, just fell in love with Robin as a character. Anyways, because of all this, even though Enies Lobby is half a story, it is able to stand alone as an arc, because that's just how good it really is. Number 3, Wano. Imagine an arc that combines all the other arcs into one, and the result of that is Wano. It has the emotions, the comedy, the shock, and the twist, and even multiple fights of the year contenders with the change in art style that accommodates the Japanese style setting almost perfectly. Plus, on top of all that, it also has world building, whether it be for Wano as a country or past stories of Odin, where we finally get to see fights and stories we've been waiting to see since the beginning of the series. And with the Reverie right before, adding on top of that, the world we thought we knew before became even crazier the deeper you get into Wano. Wano brings transformations that break the internet, and even Emperor fights that were better than the last. And with all this, Wano really is an arc that does what every other arc does, but just better. And honestly, if you watch this arc weekly, God bless your soul. And I wouldn't be surprised if you had this arc not even in the top 10, because my god, half a chapter an episode should feel illegal. Overall, Wano is an arc that is 150 chapters long, but keeps me intrigued the whole time. And finally, going into number 1. And even though I said Wano basically did everything what every other arc did but better, which I stand by, but I don't know if it's biased or having to wait weekly for this arc, which yes, I'm talking about number 1, Marineford. Marineford is an arc that brings together basically almost everyone we've met in the story so far together to have an all-out war spanning over 33 episodes, whether they're part of an Emperor's fleet or 7 Warlord of the Sea, or even the government and their over 100,000 soldier army. This arc had it all. There were some of the greatest shocks and revelations we've seen so far in the series, and this arc isn't just a war arc, it's a rescue arc, and because of that, it built up to one of the most emotional scenes that shocked the entire One Piece world and turned it upside down. This arc is just pure perfection to me. It's an arc that will forever stand the test of time. Even over a decade later, there is still no parallel to this story. Marineford arc was 13 years ago, and by the end of Marineford, Oda has already proved to be one of the greatest mangakas of all time. Then he continued One Piece for more than a decade later and is still going and producing masterpiece after masterpiece of arcs, like Wano and Egghead, which is all building up to another war arc like Marineford, and Oda himself said it's going to be the greatest shonen arc ever. And do I know how he tops Marineford arc? Well, I don't, but one thing I've learned over the years is to trust the GOAT. And one last thing, people complain that One Piece is too long, and to that I say, well, because it's so long, we're gonna have so much build up and decades worth of world building, and that leads to some of the greatest arcs in shonen history. Anyways, if you somehow made it this far, consider hitting the subscribe button, maybe even a like. Thank you for watching.